I did a little bit of stuff when I was a kid, but, nothing really sort of to write home about. It was like, a little bit of boxing, like a couple of classes of Taekwondo. Just wasn't into it. I was just like, nah, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, So for years and years, I surfed as well when I was younger a lot. Like obviously just living near the coast, you kind of just grow up in that lifestyle and you just kind of take it up at some stage or another. But yeah, I kind of stopped doing all of that when I got into my late teens and started to, do other things. And, I just didn't have time for sport anymore. I think I quit playing basketball when I was about 18 or 19. And that was kind of the last one that went. But, then it was just basically weekends at gigs and pubs and, all the other things that you do around all that sort of stuff. And I didn't do any exercise.
Behavior.
Yeah. I didn't do any exercise for, I reckon, about 10 years. And it showed.
Oh, really?
I was so unfit back then. Yeah. And I was, I think I was 28 when I started doing jiu-jitsu.
Greetings, Legion, and welcome to episode 264 of Into the Necrosphere. I am joined this week by the great Chris McEwin of the almighty Destructor out of Australia, making his debut on Into the Necrosphere. Chris is the bassist for the band. Their brand new album, as you should know by now, is entitled Indomitable. It's available on Hells Headbangers Records. It featured on my top 30 of 2024, and he and I spoke about the record, spoke about music. We also spoke about his martial arts journey. Chris is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu instructor, a hell of a nice bloke, and we had a lot to say to each other over the course of about a 90-minute conversation. That's going to be coming your way very shortly, but first, as usual, we need to feature an unsigned band. This week's Unsanctioned Filth comes our way courtesy of a member of the Legion. Craig St. John writes, "Hey Jackie, long-time listener and fan of the show. Here's a new track from an unsigned band that shouldn't be unsigned. I happen to agree. The band is Centuries of Decay. The song is To Dust." Centuries of Decay featured on this week's Unsanctioned Filth, the first single of an upcoming album due for release sometime in 2025. No details about that have been unveiled yet, but the song, of course, was called To Dust. I love it. I will post a link to their Bandcamp in the description as always. Head over there. Show them that we're well ahead of the curve over here on Into the Necrosphere, and pre-order, buy some music, buy some merch, whatever they're hawking on there. I also want to say big thanks to Craig for the submission. And as always, if you are in an unsigned band and you've just spent your last penny on your best ever recording, desperate for somebody to hear your dormant talent, drop me a line either on email. I'm on intothenecrosphere@gmail.com, or you can reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook. And if I like what I hear, I will feature it on the show, at which point, who knows what wealth and riches and fame await you. Friends, I'm a proud member of the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse, a group of like-minded content creators dedicated to filling your week from Monday to Sunday with the very best in podcasting entertainment. We start on a Monday with Brandon Legion and Horrible 666. Yours truly casts hexes and slays poses every Tuesday on Into the Necrosphere. Next week, I am very pleased to announce that I managed to have a conversation with easily the most requested guest on Into the Necrosphere, and has been for at least the last 9 months. I'm speaking of Justin Horval of Hells Headbangers, aka J-Dog of the Dead by Dog channel. And trust me when I say, not a single wimp was left not torn asunder at the end of that conversation. That is definitely one you are not going to want to miss, and it's coming your way next Tuesday. On a Wednesday, we've got Mike Hill, Sensei Mike Hill of the bands Tombs and Scorpion Throne, with his podcast Everything Went Black. We also have the great Cheyenne of the band Trivax deploying Iblis Manifestations. I am going to be on Iblis Manifestations in the next week or two. We're actually recording at the time I'm recording this segment. We're doing that recording in 2 days' time. So I had a really nice dinner with him and his wife-to-be over the weekend, and we felt there was a lot that we needed to get off our chest. So that'll be a spicy one, no doubt. Keep an eye out for it. It'll be on Iblis Manifestations. On a Thursday, we have the return of Sensei Mike Hill. He is joined by the outlaw Sheriff Mike Scondado, like both outlaw and sheriff, Mike Scondado, and the Professor Jeff Kashid. They do Necromaniacs, one of my very favorite podcasts of the week. They review new and old horror movies. They help set you up for the weekend, and I never ever miss that, come what may. We also have Soul Knox, the first of two deployments, the second of which comes out on a Sunday. That is hosted by the Sinister Minister, the Reverend Carl Haikara, and I was a guest on the most recent episode of Soul Knox. We did a deep dive into the discography of My Dying Bride. Took that one top to bottom, spoke about our favorite music, or our favorite songs, favorite albums, spoke about our least favorite songs and albums, and we also got deep into some of the, I wouldn't say controversy, but some of the drama surrounding the vocalist situation in that band right now. When I am done talking to Chris, my friends, don't go anywhere, because those of you that know, those of you that are high-ranking members in the Legion know that it's time for the weekly news rant. This week, I am rounding up for Judgement, new singles by Hexvessel, Gates to Hell. We're also listening to a surprise new single by The Haunted, listening to a new single by And Oceans, and of course, I answered your questions. This week's questions included my top 5 bands of all time. I spoke about my top 5 favorite Polish bands of all time, which English bands I wish to see reform, and much more. That's coming later on. But first, sit back, buckle up, as I welcome for the first time ever to Into the Necrosphere, Chris McEwin of Destructor. I was about to say, is that for this weekend, or is it?
It's, what it is, it's actually a bunch of empty whiskey bottles that one of my mates collects. So he makes vases out of them. So whenever I finish a bottle off, I just chuck them in a box here and then just give them to him.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. You had, or do you, as like, is it so let me frame the question properly.
Yep.
You mentioned to me that you teach at a Jiu-Jitsu academy.
Yep.
Is that like your full-time job, or is that just something that you do as a sideline?
Yeah, it's just a side thing. So I work full time in like a support coordination role for a local government scheme. But I after work, so I work full time Monday to Friday. After work, usually Monday through Thursday, I'm in there most nights of the week, and I teach morning classes and I teach a night class as well during the week, and then all the other nights I just train. So just in there most of the time when I'm not doing work and other things on weekends. So.
What age groups do you train?
Adults, so anything 15 and up, pretty much.
Preparing them for traveling to Hong Kong for the Kumite.
Yeah, not quite.
I was watching a thing the other day about a documentary about blood sport, and I think that everyone who is of a certain generation, it's inevitable that at some point in your life you absolutely adored that movie. And I was sitting thinking to myself, I wonder if you had to do an analysis of some sort, how many people got turned on to martial arts by either Enter the Dragon or Bloodsport? Because I would wager at least 80% of everyone from my generation that did get into it, whether it was karate, judo, whatever the case may be, it was one of those two movies.
Yeah, it was those two, and for me, it was a bunch of others too. It was definitely Enter the Dragon, definitely Bloodsport, Kickboxer. What else was there? No Retreat, No Surrender. The Octagon, the Chuck Norris movie. I always liked that one. The Drunken Master, they were all pretty cool.
Yeah.
And even the other Bruce Lee movies, like The Big Boss was awesome too.
Yeah, see, I didn't see those until quite a bit later in my life. We only had in South Africa. We only had, for the longest time, 4 TV channels. So it was kind of, you caught what was on those, or you got it from the video store. But my martial arts movie phase lasted for it lasted probably up until about 1989, and then it was Arnie. So Commando and particularly Predator. As soon as I got into Predator, there was no other movies for me, and Predator to me was the blueprint for how a man should behave. So.
You've got the same movie trajectory, like from timeline wise, as what I had. So I got into all the martial arts movies when I was really young. Then I got into Arnie, and just sort of progressed through that. Got into Stallone movies, got into Chuck Norris movies, got into Steven Seagal movies. Which you look back at it now and you're like, oh my god.
I would say in Seagal's defense, I still think that Above the Law is a cool movie. I mean, a lot of almost everything else that he did was terrible, but Above the Law and Under Siege, they're still good movies, and I personally think they still hold up.
I think Hard to Kill was the first one that I saw. I think my mum used to watch that one actually, and I was just like, oh, this is cool. I'll watch this with you one night, and I watched it, and I was just like, yeah, this is pretty cool. So I think it was that, and then it was Nico, Above the Law. God, what else did he do? Out for Justice was another one.
Yeah, Out for Justice, I remember really well.
That one was all right, I think.
Where he goes and beats everybody up with the cue ball inside the sock.
Yeah. God, I haven't seen those movies in 25 years.
Do you follow a YouTube channel called Space Ice?
No.
Dude, you would absolutely love it. So he does these like 80s nostalgia movies, but particularly Steven Seagal, and he just gives like a narration. He does like a 10-minute narration of the movie while showing you scenes from it. He kind of has this ongoing dump on Steven Seagal theme that runs through all of his stuff, but it is so fucking funny. Yes, it's called Space Ice.
All right, I'm subscribed now.
Dude, you will thank me for it, because if you were into those movies, you'll kind of laugh at it from a nostalgia perspective, but just also the fact the dude is fucking hysterical.
Oh yeah, and I love that sort of stuff too. Someone showed me one a little while back, a friend of mine, and it was I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was like something Kojak or something like that, and it was like all these old. It was an old series that was, I think it was all in Russian or something or other, and they overdubbed it in English, and like made up their own dialogue for it. So it wasn't a translation. I'm pretty sure they just made up their own dialogue for it. And I think it was maybe Channing Tatum who was one of the. I'm speaking really vaguely here too. Like I only watched it for a short while, but I think it was Channing Tatum did one of the voices, and it was utterly hilarious. I can't remember what it was called.
No, I'll have to look that up. But when it comes to jiu-jitsu, was jiu-jitsu the first thing that you took up as a martial art, or did you do some other bits before then?
I did a little bit of stuff when I was a kid, but nothing really sort of to write home about. It was like, a little bit of boxing, like a couple of classes of taekwondo. Just wasn't into it. I was just like, nah, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, So I never really stuck with any of it. When I was younger, I sort of just played team sports mostly. I played basketball, and I played like school rep stuff, like basketball, footy, just things like that. I was never any good at any of it except basketball, but yeah, I used to just sign up to team sports through school. But yeah, it was like, for years and years. I surfed as well when I was younger a lot. Like obviously just living near the coast, you kind of just grow up in that lifestyle and you just kind of take it up at some stage or another. But yeah, I kind of stopped doing all of that when I got into my late teens and started to, do other things. And, I just didn't have time for sport anymore. I think I quit playing basketball when I was about 18 or 19. And that was kind of the last one that went. But, yeah, then it was just basically weekends at gigs and pubs and, all the other things that you do around all that sort of stuff. And I didn't do any exercise.
Behavior.
Yeah. I didn't do any exercise for, I reckon, about 10 years. And it showed.
Oh, really?
I was so unfit back then. Yeah. And I was, I think I was 28 when I started doing jiu-jitsu. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you took that up much, much later in your life.
Yeah.
What made you decide to start doing it?
So a guy who, I used to be in a band called Donna Retribution, and we used to rehearse on weekends. So Saturday rehearsals meant, daytime, midday till 4 o'clock. Everyone else who, it was outside the band, they were just like, oh, what are you guys doing this weekend? And we're like, well, we're going to be jamming, down at the rehearsal studio, Pan Studios. And they would just come down and bring beers. And one of the guys who used to come down and hang out there, I didn't know at the time when we were hanging out, but it turns out he was a brown belt. He'd been training since he was about 13 or 14. His name's Dan Cherubin. And he's the same age as me. And he got his black belt in about 2008, I think it was, or 2009. And once he got his black belt, he was still quite young. So he just decided, I'm going to open an academy and see how it goes. And yeah, I started training there a couple of months after he opened up, and I've still there. So yeah, been there for 15 years now. I've been teaching classes for probably about 10 or 12 years. I started teaching really, really early on in my training. Like I'd been training for maybe 2 or 3 years when I started teaching. And I think it was a big part of, being able to sort of progress through the knowledge timeline that you need to, like, just building your knowledge. I think teaching was a huge part of that, and me being able to retain things and understand things that I was doing. Because a lot of the time when you're training, you're not really thinking about what you're actually doing. You learn a technique and you go and, you apply it, and then you try and do it in a live situation. It doesn't work. And it's just like, well, it doesn't work, so I'm just not going to do it, And I've seen that a lot. But when you understand what you're actually doing, it makes it much easier to adapt and apply it in, a real scenario. So, yeah, it's just, I just thought it was a huge, and I can't recommend it enough for anybody who's training, is to try and teach classes and things as well, because it's a real game changer as far as developing your own technique and your own sort of understanding of what you're doing too.
Well, there's a saying, there's something to the effect of teaching or training or whatever the case may be. Like teaching creates the obligation to mastery. So, you can't teach something that you don't know, that you don't understand. So therefore, you kind of create the imperative in your own mind that I need to wrap my head around this, and I need to be able to do this properly, because how else am I going to pass that knowledge on effectively to anybody else? What created the love for jiu-jitsu in you? Because, clearly it sounds like you just took to it naturally, and you were sort of, I think that jiu-jitsu, from all the experience I've had, you need to be completely and utterly obsessed with it to be able to progress to black belt.
Yeah. So I definitely wasn't a natural. When I started training, I was about 100 kilos of just mess. I was just
pure man.
I was just pure fat. It was like 10 years of not fat. Like I was just, I was a bit puffy around the edges, we'll say. But in my body shape, that equates to about 100 kilos of, not very fit. So I was running a little bit before I started doing jiu-jitsu, but I never really I wasn't out doing, 10K runs or anything like what people do these days for fun. But, I'd do 5Ks a night, 3Ks here and there. Occasionally I'd push to 7. That'd be about it. I'd be knackered at the end of that. So, it was nothing elite. When I started doing jiu-jitsu, I remember this, distinctly remember the very first session I ever did. And by the end of the warm-up, I was nearly out throwing up. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. And I just remember, I'm the kind of person who, when I start something, I like to finish it. And once I'd showed up for a few classes, I was just like, that's it. I'm going, I'm sticking to this. I'm gonna give it a real red hot crack here, because there's nothing that I can see in it that's bad for me. It's only going to benefit me physically, mentally, all that sort of thing. And I think the thing that really attracted me to it over the first couple of years that I was involved in it was just the fact that even when you think you know something, when you're doing it and you think, yep, cool, I've got this now, you don't. There's always another aspect or another detail, or something changes, someone does something and then they evolve the thing, and it just keeps moving forward. And even now, 15 years into doing it, 4 or 5 days a week, and it's still evolving, and there's still new things coming out. People are changing things. People are applying themselves, in different ways. There's old school techniques that have been around for years and years and years and years, and people are kind of bringing them back out now and then changing them a little bit, and then, sort of claiming that they invented it. And it's like, there's videos from the 30s of people doing the same thing, but they're just maybe not doing it as, in the same way that you're doing it. But it's an ever-growing cycle. It's never going to stop. It's just going to keep going through the motions. And, without getting into too much detail, there's kind of fads that come in and out of it and everything. Like, leg locks were a big thing for a while. Everyone started to learn how to defend leg locks because everyone was doing them. And then, the next thing comes in, which is wrestling crossed over with jiu-jitsu, and there was this technique called the berimbolo that was around for a while, and that became really popular, and everyone learned how to beat that and how to reverse that, and then the next thing came in, and it just keeps going. And the fun part's trying to guess what's going to be next and trying to be ahead of the game, because we don't know.
Who in jiu-jitsu right now do you think is the most innovative and the most disruptive the most disruptive jiu-jitsu player on the planet?
Disruptive as in competitively, or disruptive just in general?
Well, I would suggest probably led competitively, but the person who's coming in and bringing in more of these new techniques, or at least these kind of evolved techniques, these tweaks to existing techniques. And I'm asking that out of curiosity more than anything else. But who's the man?
There's a few. If you're talking, there's two different worlds. There's the gi world and then there's the no gi world, right? If you're talking the no gi world, everyone's going to talk about Gordon Ryan. Ryan's this dude who's just been around for, I'm not going to be accurate, but I think around 10 years at black belt or something like that, maybe a bit less, 7 years at black belt. I know he hasn't been training that long. He got his black belt really quickly from what I can remember. But yeah, he beats everyone at the moment. He's pretty much up there as far as, the best guy in the no-gi world. But he's not my favorite guy to watch. I find when I'm watching his stuff, I just kind of, it's impressive, but the way that people kind of compete against him makes his matches boring, and I kind of understand what he's talking about when he says that people just try and stall him out and, things like that. But there are some guys who are really, really exciting guys, young guys, like the Rotolo brothers are really good. Mika Galvao is really good. He's good in gi and no gi. Actually, so are the Rotolos, but they've kind of moved across to no gi. But yeah, these guys are all good. There's a whole breed of young guys coming up at the moment that are all really impressive. So yeah, and that's gi and no gi. There's Tynan Dalpra from Art of Jiu-Jitsu. He's really, really good in the gi. Probably the best guy in the gi at the moment, pound for pound anyway. But yeah,
and you do.
Yeah, it's really sort of coming into its own again. You know, like the gi's kind of taken a back seat at the moment to the no gi. It's much more popular, but the gi's still chugging along. It'll still be there, and it'll make its comebacks at some stage.
Why do you think no gi has taken over gi? Is it because of the MMA component to it, and a lot of people that do jiu-jitsu do naturally are doing MMA as well?
I think so. I think that the MMA stuff is a big reason why, because obviously nobody wears a gi in MMA these days. And there's another reason that I think people would claim, but I don't necessarily agree with it. Like people say that no gi is more conducive to like street fighting, so it's more realistic. And I'm just like, but it's not, like there are rules in no gi, and like the actual like kits that you're wearing during no gi, competition or whatever, you can't grab the material, and you can't grab the material and things like that. In the gi, you can grab all the material, you can use it to choke people. If I get a guy who tries to do anything to me in the street, I'm grabbing his t-shirt and I'm choking the living hell out of him with his t-shirt, So like, I think that that's just a mood argument. I don't think that that's realistic at all. But I think that people just find it's faster, like you don't get stuck in positions for as long. It's probably a little bit more exciting to watch, especially for people who don't know what they're watching. Like obviously when you've been training a while, you watch a gi match and you can see all the little details going on, the grip battling and, stuff like that, little, positions where they're like trying to just get their hip out to get a hook in and stuff like that. And, you don't see that if you're not sort of interested in it. But I am really interested in what the UFC announced last week, which is that they're going to put in like millions of dollars into jiu-jitsu over the next 12 months.
I was gonna mention that to you. Dana mentioned that on I think it was the UFC 300 or 313 post-fight conference. And I think the idea is to put it on their platform on Fight Pass. But it's going to they want to invest a lot into it, and that's super interesting because what that I think will also do is, I mean, obviously just the proliferation of the UFC has driven so many people to go and actually start training. I think it might potentially be boom time for jiu-jitsu academies, if should grappling take off as well.
Yeah, I hope so. And I mean, it's already blowing up in popularity. I mean, when I first started training, it was like our instructor who was a black belt, and then there was, maybe 15 or 20 of us on the mat, and we were all white belts. One guy was a blue belt and he'd been training for a couple of years, but the rest of us were all just fresh, Now our classes every night are between like 40 and 70, every night. And now we've gotten to the point where at our particular club, we've moved like the classes around so that we've got gi classes and no gi classes every night. So, guys don't have to do one on one night and one on the other night. They can do either or whatever. They can just come in and choose on the nights. So, and it's good. And we're getting good numbers at both of them. So, but there's so many young kids coming through, like lots of guys in there sort of, teens, late teens, early 20s, fit, young, athletic guys who are coming through. It's getting hard, man.
How old are you now?
I'm 43. So
all right, yeah. So you're not far off from me. And those hard sessions, you feel them a little longer than you did 10 years ago.
Oh, creatine was the best thing I ever discovered in my life for muscle soreness, I can tell you.
Have you ever competed, or did you ever go down the road of competition?
Yeah, I did when I was sort of in the first, like when I was white and blue belt, I competed a fair bit. I just kind of stopped doing it because I was more interested in the coaching side of things. Like I would still go to the competitions with the other guys, but I was just more there in a coaching sort of role. And I don't know, like I'm not a competitive person. I just didn't have the drive to, pay X amount of dollars and go in a competition and then just like not care when the other guy's just hungry as fuck. And I'm just like sitting there going, I don't care, man. Like if you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. And I would just walked away from competitions all the time, just going, oh yeah, that was all right. Didn't feel any different to anything else. And it cost me a lot more money. So I just kind of found that, I was just more attracted to the coaching role, I think. And honestly, I think I'm a bit more analytical in my brain, and I was more suited to that side of the game as well. I think that, getting into that early in my training was, a bit more my style of going through the process. So yeah.
What is it about coaching that you find particularly gratifying?
I actually like the variety that you get with coaching, because when I'm teaching students, every single person in that room is different. Everyone's got their own learning style. Everyone's got their own physical abilities. Everyone's got, like, there's always the anomaly in the room too. Like, something will work for everybody except one person. And it's like, well, you got to figure out how you can actually make it work for them, or how you can adapt it to make it work for them in a different way. So, like, when you're coaching a room full of 50 people, it's really, really hard to get around and get everybody sort of covered. But I always try and just walk around to everybody and just make sure that everybody's okay with it. And, I want everyone as well to know, as a coach, that I'm quite happy for people to ask me questions and, like, spend some time with me. If I can manage the time, I'll spend the time. But yeah, I think that it's just that I like being able to sort of see everyone's development and just know that I've had a part in that. And it's especially good when you've got guys who, like, in my morning classes, there are people who only come into those morning classes, so they're only ever coached by me, right? Whereas if you come into the night classes, you get coached by Dan, you might get coached by one of the other guys, Chris, as well. He teaches a lot of the no-gi classes, and there's a lot of fill-in guys too who, just run classes here and there. But knowing that there's a guy who I've developed from the ground up, who, goes into a competition and does really well, or, you can just see him developing on the mat, and it's just a good feeling to know that you've been able to, help somebody in something that they want to get good at. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had a little bit of a dabble in really assisting coaches with boxing and with Thai boxing. And I've got to say, I enjoyed the competition side of Thai boxing as well, the few fights that I did. But it's a different kind of enjoyment, but I thoroughly enjoyed being, in the corner for somebody, as an example, when we're, when they're fighting. I did. So we used to have a boxing league in the UK called Queensbury Boxing, which was also kind of like semi-pro, smaller ring, shorter rounds. The fights were usually great, but I was in the corner for a couple of dudes. One guy, unfortunately, got completely and utterly destroyed. I felt terrible because I had to throw the towel. It's the one and only time I had to throw the towel in.
It happens, isn't it? It's just part of it.
Yeah. The other guy that I cornered, he actually won a middleweight belt, and it was so good seeing that, because he was such a coachable guy as well, because he would, anytime he came to the corner, anything you told him, it would be like a video game. He would just go out and do exactly what you said. And, fortunately on that occasion, everything actually worked out properly. Awesome. Here's the most critical martial arts related question for you.
Yeah.
In a real fight, who wins between Jean-Claude Van Damme, Frank Dukes, or Bolo Ying, Chong Li? Because it befuddled me when I was young. Like, even though, it's a movie, but I could never wrap my head around it. It's like, how could they present to me this idea that Chong Li would lose in this fight? He's so much cooler looking. He's so much more muscular. And look how he's fucked everybody up in the run up to the final battle as well. I think
those hypotheticals, like, you've got to look at it from a different perspective, though, because, and the first thing you learn when you start doing martial arts is, just because you know a martial art doesn't mean that you're completely invulnerable. Like, you can always you can always get blindsided. You can always do something stupid in the moment. Like, anyone, like the old saying goes, anyone's got a good punch, and it only takes one punch. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I always like to think that Bolo would actually get one day, but
I was such a fan of Chong Li. I thought he was just, and I know I was very young when I watched it, and it's, possibly weird, some kid cheering on the villain in the movie, but I thought he was.
I always cheer on the villains.
Yeah, no, I thought he was awesome. With Enter the Dragon, it was a bit different, because I was obsessed with Bruce Lee. Like, to me, he just, the look, the attitude, the vibe, I just thought he was the best. But
it was cool. It was very cool
to me. Tell me something. You mentioned earlier watching the post-fight press conference for UFC 313. I'm assuming you watch the UFC, or you follow the UFC as well?
Yeah, we've got a small group of us actually that sort of get together every time there's a pay-per-view on, and we watch it all together, and we just sort of rotate around houses, and whoever's hosting that time puts on food and drinks and whatever else, and then we all just sort of turn up and we just move from house to house. But Yeah, no, we try and watch as much as we can. So, you know, me and my wife are both into it. So, you know, Sundays is because for us it's on Sunday mornings. So we wake up on a Sunday and we just sit down and chill out on the couch and watch fights and, you know, just spend the day just being potatoes.
Yeah. And we've got a pretty decent card coming up with 314 as well. Volk against Diego Lopez, Michael Chandler against Paddy Pimblett.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this one. You know why? I'm going to be on a flight.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're playing in Sydney the night before, and we're flying back out, and our flight leaves at the same time that the main card starts on that day. So I'm going to miss it.
Oh, dude. Who are the fighters that you have your eye on particularly at the moment? Like, you know, people that are, if they're on the card to you, it's an absolute must see.
Yeah, Diego Lopez is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God. There's heaps. Like, I kind of just look at the cards and just go, oh yeah, he's good. Yeah, he's good. Yeah, he's good. Oh, you know, him versus him will be awesome. I love watching Dustin Poirier. Like, I know he's at the end of his career, but I've always just loved watching him. Like, he's just exciting. You know, like he goes out, he delivers. Same with Gaethje. You know, like on the weekend, I was stoked to watch Gaethje versus Fiziev. It was just I expected an absolute war. Yeah. And we got one. It was cool. You know, like I just like those guys who just sort of, you know what you're going to get when you see them, you know, every single time. Like, you know, Charles Oliveira is another one. I can remember watching him, you know, years and years and years ago when he was almost a jobber, you know, like he was just getting chucked into any old fight and he would just take him. But he was just beating guys, you know, and they were just like, oh, you know, this guy's probably a little bit better than he. And then he ended up becoming champion like how many years later? It was just, you know, it was unbelievable watching his career unfold and sort of, you know, get to where it was at. And I don't think he's done. You know, I think he's still got another crack in him.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm the same in fights as what I am with movies. You know, I always kind of I like to go for the underdogs, and you know, I don't like the really popular fighters for the most part. I like Alex Pereira, you know, but I never really got into. I never followed or was. I mean, I was interested in their careers, but I wasn't sort of, you know, invested in their careers. Guys like Connor and you know, like who was the other one that was really getting backed hard. Oh God. Oh, I mean, even Ronda Rousey, you know, like she was insanely good until she got knocked out. And then it was just
until she met Holly Holm.
Yeah, when she met Holly Holm's shin.
Yeah, see, I was a big fan of Holly Holm. I've actually been a really big fan of the women's division for a number of reasons. One, I think Valentina Shevchenko to me is one of those fighters where I can't remember who she was fighting, but I remember watching the fight and thinking to myself, like, I feel so fortunate that I'm able to witness this woman's peak, you know, while it's unfolding. Kind of like, you know, getting to see Anderson Silva in his prime. You know, he's a guy that will be spoken of, you know, for generations to come. And you're going to be able to say, you know, much like the people that'll say I was there for Mike Tyson's peak or I was there for Muhammad Ali's peak. I think you know, certainly in mixed martial arts circles, those people are in the same echelon to me. Valentina Shevchenko, Amanda Nunes. I mean, that thrashing she put on Ronda Rousey was king.
Expected.
I mean, it was expected, but it was. It's to me the thing that I admired about I admired those two fighters for the same reason. Is just the technique is so clinical and so pristine, and if you've been in the position where you're training that, you realize just how incredibly difficult it is what they're doing. You know, and make it look so effortless.
Well, from a jiu-jitsu perspective, like you know, there's a lot of guys in you know, divisions and things that are really, really high level jiu-jitsu, but there's a few particular guys that I've kind of been watching, and you haven't really seen a lot of their game yet, and that's really interesting. Like you know, I mean, one that I am watching quite closely, and I think I'm kind of becoming a bit of a fan of, is Bo Nickel. But I just saw yesterday that who's he got in his next fight? It's actually going to be a real hard one. He's got someone really good. I actually sent the message to a bunch of mates just saying, "Oh, look out, Bo's got a real challenge now."
Rainier.
He's got Derrida.
Rainier Derrida, yeah.
Yeah, he's got Dorita. So when he was in 1FC, he was a beast. So, like he tapped out dudes that they weren't expecting. So they both got good ground game. So that'll be a battle. We'll see what happens. I don't know. It could be a striking match. Might not even see him go to the ground. But yeah, if they do, it'll get interesting.
It's an interesting thing about a lot of wrestlers, though, is they discover striking and then they really like it, and then they just don't really go back to wrestling again, and sometimes to their detriment.
Ilya Taporia is a perfect example. Like he's a high level grappler and just knocking dudes out like no one's knocking anyone out. Like no one's ever knocked out Max, and he knocked out Max. He knocked out Volk. Like it was just insane. Like what he's doing to people at the moment is just insane. Like if he fights Makhachev, I'm watching that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as long as I'm on a flight.
Just on the topic of underdogs, probably my favorite underdog fighter of all time, Matt the Immortal Brown.
Oh, Matt Brown, yeah, absolutely.
A dude that did things to fighters. Like when the fights that he won in such spectacular fashion.
He's a savage.
You could not cheer for the dude.
Nah, love that guy. Absolutely love that guy. I still follow his Twitter page and everything too, because he's actually he's really fun to watch, and he's a metalhead too. So,
I know he's a metalhead, but plays guitars. Yeah. I constantly post video of himself playing guitar. Favorite fighters of all time?
All time, honestly, probably Anderson Silva. All time, who else? Anderson's the one that really stands out. I would probably say Max is getting up there too. Like, I kind of don't want him to keep going. I think he's kind of done enough. And I think he's done enough, and he's just kind of, if he has maybe one more good win and then just kind of cements his legacy and retires, I think that's a really, really good career for him. All time, Volk. Like, I mean, I know these guys are more modern sort of era. The other one that I really liked back in the day was Chuck Liddell. Like Chuck Liddell was just so much fun.
How can you not, mate?
Yeah. Like he was so much fun to watch. And one of my mates absolutely loves Tank Abbott. So I can't not mention him.
Yeah. No, my favorite fighter was and probably always will be Dan Henderson. I was a fan of his all the way back to Pride. When he came to the UFC, I was like, his whole run. I mean, the both fights against Shogun, I think, are two of the best ever. Loved Robbie Lawler. I was really, really happy to see him inducted into the Hall of Fame. That's overdue. They should have done it straight after the fight with Rory McDonald.
Oh, actually, there's another guy, Clay Guida. My God.
Blast for the past. I know, people are divided over the man, but John Jones, I don't see how you can possibly be into martial arts as a student of the game and not believe that he's one of the greatest to ever live.
Oh, if anyone says that he's not, they've got some kind of chip on their shoulder over something that he's done. Yeah. But I think you've got to take all of that out of it, because in that cage, nobody is better than him. Yeah, I mean, the one mark that he has on his career was a disqualification by 12 to 6 elbows, and he's got a no contest because he tested positive afterward or something like that. But as far as like his actual skills and ability, nobody is better than him. Like no one. No one even close. Like no one's even close. He is head and shoulders above everyone. Anderson's probably the only other guy I'd say who was that good.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree. GSP in that conversation too, I would say.
Yeah, I've got a different opinion on GSP. So I respect the absolute hell out of his career, but I think that he fell into a bit of a rut, and I think that he became more of a fight to win as opposed to fight to finish. He developed a strategy which was really sort of points based, and just. It was almost like a Floyd Mayweather style for MMA, if you know what I mean. Like it was like, he just wanted to do what he needed to win, not put himself at risk and walk away, to be able to do the next thing. And then when he fought Johnny Hendricks that time, it was just like his strategy worked for him. And if you actually go back and watch that fight, I know everybody thinks that Johnny Hendricks won, and at the time I did too. But if you go back and watch the fight, GSP won the fight. He just took way more damage. But his actual strategy in that fight was, like much more intelligent as far as scoring points and winning rounds. then I mean, if they scored it just on damage, which they don't, and people keep on forgetting that, is that, you know, the scoring system is based on a few different things, not just damage. You know, go back and watch the fight though, and you'll see he won enough. He won enough rounds.
Yeah, no, I remember that fight very well, and I actually thought at the time that he'd won. Possibly because I was biased, but I did feel like he had won. I do find a lot of I mean, you know, so I got into the UFC really, really early. I've watched the sport grow and evolve. I do feel, sadly, and it's just inevitable with any combat sport, it's like boxing. It does attract an element of fan that is, I mean, let's be honest, a fucking moron.
Yeah,
kind of. I mean, it's kind of the
this
same.
Is why we started watching it. This is why we started watching it at home instead of going to the pub to watch it every weekend.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen. So I was at UFC 70, 75, and 85. And you know, even in that short time span, the caliber of some people that showed up there is just, it's not my kind of person. There was one dude that was, yeah. No, so the headliners were 70 was Mirko Krokop against Gabriel Gonzaga. That's where Gonzaga gave him the head kick, heard around the world. Everyone in the arena for a split second thought that Krokop was dead.
Yeah. I've got that on DVD actually.
I was like, that was a superb card, and that was a great fight. I mean, I was devastated for Krokop because I was a huge fan.
Yeah, actually, I was too. He was awesome.
Dude,
his kicks were insane.
Absolute savage. And then 75 was Rampage against Hendo. I mean, that was like I practically jumped on my chair in the last round, like, you know, because they both came so close to, you know, doing some serious, meaningful fight-changing damage. And then 85, I can't even remember. I know it was Matt Hughes. I can't remember who.
I was going to say Matt Hughes would have been around at that time too. So
yeah, I think let me see who 85 was. It might be Matt Hughes against Thiago Silva, but I might be wrong. Not Thiago Silva. Sorry, Thiago Alves.
Oh, Thiago Alves. Yeah,
Thiago Alves used to be pretty cool as well. But yeah, that was a pretty decent card. But I remember, I think it was at 85. Some fucking idiot turned up there with a replica WWE belt around his waist. And he had taken a piece of paper and written UFC on it and sellotaped it over the WWE logo. And then he was wearing like a suit jacket and walking around with a cane and a flat cap. And I do have the photo somewhere. I'll see if I can find it, and I'll send it to you if I can dig it up. He took himself 100% seriously, because I was watching him from a distance, like thinking, where are the video cameras? And at what point is Ashton Kutcher going to jump out and say you're being punked? Oh. This dude was 1,000% serious, and unfortunately, to me, he's the embodiment of a lot of people that show up at some of those events. But it's kind of, I mean, my other favorite sport is rugby, and it's kind of the same. Cool. You go to a rugby game, and there are so many fucking idiots there. It's borderline unlivable. You just have to figure out a way to tune them out.
It's the same at the footy here, you know, like for AFL, like, you know, you go to the games, and I mean, God, last night's game was a perfect example. So it's round 1 at the moment. So we had 2 games last week, which is round 0, which is this stupid thing the AFL's brought in. But
round 0.
Yeah. So what it is, it's all the teams that played finals last year playing a round called round 0, and they all play against each other, and then they all get a bye in the first 3 weeks of the season. But last week, because we had the cyclone up in Queensland, there were 2 games in Queensland that were scheduled, and they both got cancelled. So out of 4 games that were meant to be played, they only played 2. So it was just a complete schmozzle anyway. But last night, so Richmond, who's not supposed to have won a game for the entire season, knocked off Carlton, who was supposed to be, you know, like challenging for premiership this year, and knocked them off. They were down by 41 points at one stage, and they came back and beat them by 13.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so Carlton fans are not happy today.
Yeah.
It's actually funny because Youngie from King Parrot's a Carlton fan, and I don't often banter with him about the football, but I know that he's pretty passionate about Carlton. So,
well, let's head into music, because people are going to go, have I dropped the wrong podcast here, because we've been talking about martial arts for 35 minutes. But I want to say congratulations, mate, to you guys for an incredible record.
Thanks, man.
And like a commentary on Destructor and the Destructor name. I remember mentioning it to Nathan from Gravier when I had him on the podcast. Yeah. And there was like this reverence when he mentioned it. Yeah, no, those guys have been around for a long time, and they do. They're an amazing band. There seems to be Destructor seems to be held in a particularly high regard in Australia that I don't think people necessarily appreciate. But I mean, as somebody who came into the band setup later, what would you concur with that observation?
Yeah, I guess I'm in the fortunate position of being able to see it from both sides now, because I've known Glenn since 97 or 8, so not long after he started Destructor. And the first time I met Glenn, I actually got a copy of the Holy Trinity Denied demo on tape from him, which I still have. But that's how long I've known Glenn for, and that's how long I've been aware of Destructor. And we used to do gigs with him in other bands that I've been in over the years and things like that. And they have, like, the way that they've kind of progressed through the years as well and sort of evolved has been honestly a thing of beauty. Like, I remember a few years before I was in the band, and I was watching them at, I think it was a festival in Bendigo, and I remember just watching them and going, that's the best show I've ever seen them play. Like, they've just gotten so much better. And it's just purely because I think it's just purely because of the music that Glenn was writing. It was kind of forcing everybody to really like hone the craft, and you need to be tight to play this sort of stuff, and it needs to and everything was just becoming more professional, I think. Because it was like the level was here, and then suddenly it was here, and I was like, all right, yep, they're definitely getting things done now. So. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's the step up in songwriting between Opprobrium and Indomitable is massive. I mean, it's Opprobrium is a good record. It is also a record from 9 years prior to Indomitable, but it's just in technicality, songcraft, and just kind of pure malevolence. It's a very, very different proposition. At what point did the conversation start between you and Glenn about joining the band?
Glenn actually approached me back in, I'm going to say 2007.
Okay, so it's like a ways back.
Yeah, so when Glenn and Jared first moved to Geelong, because they originally were from Bendigo and they moved to Geelong, so it's about 3 hours away. And when they first moved to Geelong, Regan, who was their old bass player up there, he left the band and they moved down here, and they were looking for a bass player. And they approached me and said, would you be willing to have a look at it? And at the time, I was already playing in 3 or 4 bands or something like that. And I was just like, I haven't got time, man. Like, there's no way. I just can't do it. It just didn't happen. But, and I think eventually they auditioned a few different guys, and they ended up with Brad. Who I've played in a couple of other bands with before as well. We're all very incestuous in Geelong. So we're all just, in and out of each other's bands. So Brad ended up in the band for, I think it was close to like maybe 8 or 9 years or something like that, maybe even 10. He got to ride probably the best wave of Destructor, on the upkeep as far as it went, because I think he joined right when they were doing Nailed. So he didn't play on the record, but he was there for the recording of it all and everything. And then he, went through the process of writing Opprobrium and recording all of that and everything. And then, did all the touring and everything around that. So, they got to go to New Zealand and the States and, all these things, because they went and played Hells Headbangers as well, which was cool. And I'd love to be able to go and do that sort of thing with them as well. But, I don't know. We'll just sort of see what the future holds, I guess. But and then so years later, Brad left the fold, and they kind of went a couple of years with nothing really sort of happening. They were just sort of working in the background on a couple of ideas and just taking a little bit of a break, I think, just mentally from everything. And then he actually it was a show that they got asked to play with Chrisian. Hilariously, I'm wearing the T-shirt from the same show, and they got asked to play that one, and they rang me and said, will you fill in to do, just this show? And I said, yeah, sure. I'd been doing a bunch of fill-in things at the time. I did a few shows with Eschaton as well, and I was filling in with a hardcore band called Rust Proof as well. Just hired gun type stuff, do a few shows, and then just sort of, off you go. But then they asked me to fill in and do that one, and it was that one. And then I think we did another one not long after that. And then I actually went into a rehearsal with them, and they were working on some new material, which was the first 1 or 2 songs for what ended up becoming Writhe in Pain, and I think Speaking with the Dead was the other one that we were doing at the time as well. And we kind of got working on that, and I became really interested in what they were doing with these new songs, and I was like, I kind of invested myself in the process at that point. And then, after a few more jams, it was like, I think I want to do this. And a couple of my other bands were, sort of not really doing much at the time. And, I was like, I've got the time now. So, maybe I can look at this. And, it just ended up hanging around, and then sort of just officially said to him, if you want me on full time, I'll come in. So
the rest is history.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think just for the benefit of folks from the US or from the UK that listen, because so the US and Australia are my two biggest audiences. US won't know much about Geelong. Just explain the city to folks that won't be aware of it, because it's quite unique, and it's also quite unique in the sense as you say, there's a lot of bands from there. But when you say city to the average person from the US, understandably, they're going to think, a place of, maybe 1 million, maybe a couple of million people, which is not the case whatsoever for Geelong.
No, I think our population at the moment, I'm not sure, I'd have to look it up, but I think at one stage it was about 400,000 or something like that.
I looked it up this morning, and officially I think it was 287,000 was what my sources said, yeah.
We've had a massive influx of people over the last few years, especially since COVID, because during COVID, everybody was moving from Melbourne to Geelong because we didn't have all the restrictions that Melbourne had. So anyway, I'll explain Geelong. So most of the time when I'm overseas, I just tell people I'm from Melbourne, but because it's just easier. They don't have to be explained there. But so Geelong's about an hour outside of Melbourne. It's much smaller. We've got basically just like sort of a metro section of CBD, which is only about sort of, I'd say it's about 16 blocks in total. If you want to go like, a 4x4 sort of grid, maybe 5x5, that's our city. We've got a whole heap of, built up suburbs and things around the place, but we're essentially about half an hour from the start of the Great Ocean Road. So we live, we're actually quite coastal compared to Melbourne. Like Melbourne's got beaches, but they're not the same. Like we've got surf beaches, and, we've got Torquay's 10 minutes from my house. Ocean Grove is 10 minutes in the other direction from my house. If I keep driving down past Torquay, I get to Bells Beach. That's about another 5 minutes down the road. Keep going along, and then we get to the Great Ocean Road, and then we, obviously just keep traveling along there. So most of the time when people from overseas come and visit, it's the first thing we do is we just take them down the Great Ocean Road because it's the easiest thing to do and everybody wants to see it. So, but we're kind of a small, big town. Everybody knows each other, like most of us have lived here forever. We kind of, a lot of people will move to Melbourne at some stage, or they'll move wherever else. But you do get a lot of relocations to Melbourne, but a lot of us who live here still at this age, we've lived here our whole lives.
I was going to ask you, did you grow up there?
Yeah, I've grown up here. So, I was working in Melbourne for a long time. So it's only an hour on the train to get up to Melbourne. So, we go up to Melbourne all the time. My wife and I live near the train station. So we just jump on the train and go up, and we'll just spend the day bar hopping or, whatever else. Go up and look at things that we need to get that we can't get down here, or, just certain shops and stuff they've got that we don't have. So, but, we were up in Melbourne last weekend just to watch the fights. So one of our friends who lives in North Melbourne, we just jumped on the train and went up there and watched the fights with her, and then just had dinner at the pub and then came home. So, yeah. But we're a very tight knit community in Geelong, especially the music industry, and that's not just limited to metal either. Like that's across all the genres. We're all pretty knowledgeable about different genres and who's playing around and who's in what bands and what sort of venues and everything. Like we know all the venue stuff and even security. Like we know most of the regular security guys and everything too. So we're a very tight-knit community, I think, and we've always kind of been that way. But it's definitely been through its ebbs and flows over the years. It was in the 2000s, it was thriving, like absolutely thriving in Geelong, but it's kind of died off a little bit over the last 10 years.
Who've been some of the, outside of Destructor, who've been some of the notable bands from Geelong?
The Red Shore was from Geelong. So originally anyway, they kind of, adapted themselves up to Melbourne. But we used to rehearse with those guys every week when they were still just writing demos and EPs. And we're quite good friends with those guys. Big bands. It's hard to say because I've been in most of them.
I was about to say Dawn of Retribution, but they're in tatters now that I'm no longer with them. So.
Yeah, we did okay. We got some big shows in Australia, and we never got overseas, but we got offered a few things. Like we were asked to play in Indonesia and things like that a few times, and just it never eventuated. There's always something, like something always gets in the way, but. I played in Nemesium, I played in Veil of Anguish. Veil of Anguish was one of the original black metal bands in Australia, and they're from Geelong. Originally started as a 2-man project in Geelong. So trying to think of who else was big or went on to be big. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard.
Yeah, not one of my favorite bands, but I am generally a very, very big supporter of the Australian scene. But I do remember hearing King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, and I was like, "Yeah, it's not my tempo."
Oh, it's definitely an acquired taste. No, we used to jam in a rehearsal room next door to them. At Pan back in the old days, they'd be in a room and we'd be in the room next to them, and everybody would come out for their like smoke break or whatever, and you'd walk out and there'd be like 9 dudes just walking out of this thing, and we're like, is everyone in the band? Yeah. Turns out they were. So I don't know what they're like these days lineup wise, but yeah, they were pretty wild back then.
It is boom time for Australian metal at the moment, though. More than I can ever record it being, because again, my love for Australian music really goes back to AC/DC, and that being the first metal band I discovered. But then, I've had Adam from Alchemist on the podcast, because to me it was criminal that band never got more recognition. And then now, in any given year, there's at least 5 or 6 Australian bands that'll be in my top 30 of any year. You guys have got so much good stuff there. I've mentioned Graveer, there's Werewolves, there's Drew Goth, there's just a ton of fucking cool stuff coming from out of Australia all the time. And the thing that I love about Australian bands, and I think Destructor is no different in this regard, I've described it as being just slightly off axis, which makes it interesting. It's like, you'll have a death metal band or you'll have a black metal band, and the way that you'll play music or the way that you'll write songs is just that, it's just that 10 degrees off axis from a typical American band or a typical European band. And it kind of gives you guys your own individual identity, and it to me, it makes the music that much more interesting.
I think you're right. And I think that there's just a little bit of an edge that Australian bands just seem to sort of nail. And I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just maybe a cultural thing that we're kind of doing without even realizing it. We like to do things a little bit differently to everybody else. Like, we don't like just copying things, It's like, I'm going to do a band and I'm going to make it sound like Cannibal Corpse. And if I wanted to do that, you could go and do that, because, you go and learn 50 Cannibal Corpse songs and then just go, cool, I've got the formula down, I can go and do it now.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to do that over here. Everyone wants to do something that's just it's in the same vein, but it's slightly different. It's got their own sort of stamp on it. And we talk about it a lot. Like, Destructor sounds like Destructor, and it always has. Like, Glenn will write a riff and I'll be listening to it and I'll be like, that's a Destructor riff without a shadow of a doubt. I'll write a riff, and because I've, written riffs in a million other bands, and he'll be like, yeah, I need to just Destructor it up a little bit. And, that's fine. And I just give him the riff and he'll just change it a bit. And I've noticed as well, like, trying to play his parts on guitar, because I'm a pretty accomplished guitarist myself, but playing Glenn's parts is a thing that I think only he's really good at. It's just really hard to replicate his style. He's just got this way of playing, and it's mostly in his right hand, I think, where he's just, relentless savagery down picking, and, just the attack on his strings. Like, he does it like I can't replicate it. I can try and play the songs, but they just don't sound the same. I know all the notes and, I can do that. But as soon as I translate it to guitar, it doesn't sound the same.
It's interesting, that cultural thing that you mentioned, though, because again, it's kind of, if you go, you go all the way back in the lineage of Australian extreme music to Sadistic Execution, and even Portal, the Berserker, I mean, Bestial Warlust. It's like it's always been there. It's kind of like almost as you described Glenn and the way that he plays guitar. The word stubbornness came to mind. It's like, I'm going to do things my way, and everything else has to fit in with that.
Glenn's not stubborn.
but for a young buck growing up in Geelong, how did the interest in music and the interest in metal start for you?
I actually started playing because I was in high school, and a couple of my friends decided they wanted to start a band, and they just sort of said to me, "Oh, like you've been a vocalist before," and I just sort of went, "Not really, but like I guess." And they said, "How would you feel about learning how to play bass?" And I just went, "Yeah, all right." I went out and bought a bass and started learning. First thing I learned was the minor scale, and then I learned Paranoid. One of my high school friends, her dad actually took me to get my first bass, and because he was a bass player in cover bands and things, so he took me and showed me a couple of things and helped me pick out a bass, and then I learned how to play, and then we sort of wrote a bunch of things, and that ended up becoming my first band, Befallen. So. Yeah, and we were around for a good 10 or 12 years, and played a lot of big shows as well. And I met most of the people that I know these days from playing shows in that band. So, yeah.
How old were you at this point?
I think I was 17 when I started, 16 or 17 when I started playing. And yeah, the other guys were a year older than me, and they were still pretty fresh into their playing as well, but a little bit more evolved, I think. Obviously, because I was still a beginner, I was playing beginner shit, so everything was pretty simple in the early days, but I definitely sort of pushed the envelope as I got better. So
yeah,
especially singing and playing at the same time was a thing that I never really had a problem with on bass, and as soon as I started playing guitar, found it really hard. So just went, I'll just get a vocalist.
Yeah, I've sometimes I'll watch old death videos as an example, and I'll look at Chuck Schuldiner, and I'll just go, I do not understand how he does this. It's just I can't wrap my head around the disconnect between what's happening here, with his hands on the fretboard, and what's happening with his vocals. Because some vocalists you can kind of you can see to a point if you've attempted it, because I've never been, I can't be successful, something like that. But if you've attempted it, you can see they're timing their voice along with the way that they play the rhythms on their guitar. But with some guys like Chuck, as an example, it was just such a disconnect between what he was doing vocally and what he was doing on the guitar. It's mind blowing, and Ishan from Emperor is the same.
Totally agree.
His vocals are in a completely different place to what he's doing on the guitar, and what he's doing on guitar is so fucking technical.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah, I don't know how he does it, because the things he's playing is just, it's basically noodling and then just singing over the top. It's his muscle memory must be that good, or his vocal, his ability to sing things without having to think about it, and then just be able to concentrate on what he's playing. It's got to be one of the two, because there's no way that he's thinking about both.
No, it's as I said, it's just I admire it because it's not something that I could ever do. It's kind of this, it's for the same reason that I admire the mixed martial artists that we were talking about earlier. I've attempted it, and I cannot get to that. I can't get to 10% of that level of mastery.
I'll tell you something I tell all the students. So they're like, I can't do this, and I'm like, no, you just can't do it now. And the other thing is, this is too hard, and it's like, no, it's challenging.
Yeah. I see it as you may love the sport, but sometimes the sport doesn't love you back. So I attempted to I loved skateboarding when I was young, and I still do, and I attempted it many times. I skated for 12 years. I was the world's fucking worst skateboarder ever. No matter how much effort I put into it, it did not change.
That's like me as a surfer.
Yeah, I think over time you just You mentioned something interesting about the jiu-jitsu, and I think this applies to music as well. Like you mentioned, you're more analytical than you are competitive, and so you kind of found your wheelhouse in coaching. I do think one of the keys as you get older is to understand what your wheelhouse is and really lean into that. I mean, there's certain things that I know I can do very, very well. And in a work context, I have these conversations with people who work for me all the time. Like and when I build teams up to work for me, because my setup last week, as I said to you, unfortunately, I had a call that fucking got dropped in for 5 o'clock, and it's something that's quite business critical for me. So it's not something I could just blow off. But as I'm kind of building up these teams to work for me, I'm always thinking about it, almost like you do a rugby team. Like you always have a player play to their strengths for the position that they're in. It's the same for me in a corporate setting, and I think the trick to being successful is finding what is that one thing that I'm very, very good at, and then really leaning into that, because what you're good at is what you're going to enjoy doing. And if you enjoy doing something, you're just naturally going to get a lot better at it.
Yeah, and I think that you're right in the sense that applies to, like a sports sense as much as it does music, because music's not just about the music, like there's so many things that we do in the background. I mean, we're very lucky in, the regard that we've got Hells Headbangers that support us and do so much work for us when we're doing things like releasing albums and stuff like that. So a lot of that work we don't have to do. But the, typical run-of-the-mill things like arranging shows, booking flights, just, organizing interviews, doing this, doing that, like there's all these different things that are always going on in the background. And it's like, managing finances, like all these sort of things, like we kind of all have roles that, we all sort of play. And I think we've got a really good dynamic between the three of us that, we know what each other are good at, and we know which things belong to which people. And, like that helps us to be able to keep things moving without too much interruption, because, we know that this responsibility is Glenn's, this responsibility is mine, like Jared looks after this stuff. And it's, it's just, it's kind of, it's like, it's like, as you say, it's a team that, everyone has their own different roles and everyone plays their own part to make things keep moving forward. So, yeah,
I was going to ask you about Hells Headbangers, because, I mean, you guys have a very vocal supporter in Justin Horval, who is to me, like one of the most interesting and unique characters in the scene right now. Like, I think he's critical. He's a great example of a guy who on his channel found what he's very, very good at and really started to lean into that very heavily. And I mean, now it's just like he's 20-minute upload a day. I never miss. It's like one of the highlights of the day. As soon as that video comes up, I'm like, I'm on that shit straight away. But what is the relationship like with Hells Headbangers? Because they really do seem to, be very firmly behind you guys.
Oh, mate, I was blown away when I came into the band and realized how supportive they are of Destructor. Like, it was mind-blowing to me, like being in other bands and being, associated with different labels and things like that over the past. The level of support that we get from Hells Headbangers is 150 out of 100. It's like, it's insane. It's so appreciated by us as well, because, like Glenn always says, like the relationship's been there since, the very early days of the label, and like the early days of Destructor, and so because of that root alone, that being the foundation of the relationship and going on this long, like there's not, we can't say thank you enough to them for the things that they do. Like they helped us to get the Indomitable album, produced, written, done, everything like that in ways that I would never have imagined, like the back and forth on things, with relation to artwork and, just stuff like that, and recording, and, we need to go in for another session, all these sort of things. And they were just, yep, cool. Yep. Like just massively supportive. It was mind blowing to me, because I just never expected to be involved with a label that's that good to a band. Because I mean, at the end of the day, the label's a business, like they're trying to make money for themselves. And to have somebody who puts that much faith in what we're going to do it doesn't apply pressure. It's just like, it's almost overwhelming. It's like, man, they got a lot of faith in us. Like, we better deliver. You know? So, yeah, like while we were up recording the album, I remember, because we stayed up for the couple of nights that we were there, because we did the majority of it in like 3 days. And we went back in for a couple of fix-up sessions here and there, but we expected to get the whole thing done in like 3 days. And we stayed in Melbourne for those days. And the conversations we would have after the sessions, it was just like, you know, man, like, it sounds like we're onto something good here. I hope it turns out the way that we're kind of thinking it does. And, you know, like for the sake of Hells Headbangers as well, because they put that much into us about it. So, yeah, but, you know, their support is amazing. Like, I've never met any of the guys myself because I've only been in the band since just before COVID. But, yeah, you know, I know that Glenn and Jared have really good relationships with them all as well. So.
It is good though, because it means they back their own judgment, and I think that it sounds like a very simple and obvious thing, but it to me it says a lot about them as businessmen. And you know, if they're good on the business side of things, then as a band, you know, you feel more confident trusting them with I mean, it's essentially your career. Because I mean, there's so many fucking shitty labels. What I would say as an aside, and I've mentioned this many times before, to me, Hells Headbangers, if I were them, I'd be going hell for leather signing up bands in Australia. I think there's so many bands in Australia that if they were introduced to a bigger audience, I think would be fucking massive.
Yeah, well, if you look at their artist list, they've got a lot of Australian bands already.
Yeah, they've got Cemetery Urn, they've got Abominator, they've got Eschaton, but there's definitely quite a few more that I would go for. I mean, again, I'm biased to a certain point, but I was befuddled as to how Prosthetic Records weren't willing to put out the new Werewolves, but put out some. I can't even remember the band, but I just remember the news came very shortly after Werewolves. They sent some fucking band through on a press release, and it's like blah 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 band, you know, transcore, and I was like, what the fuck? You seriously think that you're? I mean, I don't care about the politics of it. You seriously think that people are going to pay more attention to this fucking bullshit than you know, something like Werewolves? So.
Werewolves blow my mind too. Like, I know the guys pretty well. Like, I've known them for a long time, like all three of them. And I was actually having beers with Sam in Adelaide when I was over there towards the end of the year last year, and I was just like, which album are you up to now as far as writing? And he's like, yeah, you know, we've still got 2 in the bank. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, how does Matty just keep writing these albums and not run out of time or ideas or anything? He's just a freak.
Well, I was about to say that's been an ongoing fascination for me, as you know, as I talk to more people, and especially watching him, and I've known them for a while now as well, is as you grow older, I think some people run out of tricks. It's just a reality, like, and it's something that happens to the biggest bands. For him, for some bizarre reason, his creativity has just become more and more. Yeah, you know, he's a dude who's you know, he's not into psychedelic drugs. he's not into any of the, you know, the old romanticized idea of the artist taking fucking heroin to come up with the ideas they come up with. He's not into any of that, and yet somehow he seems to just have the ability to pick up a guitar and, you know, 35 minutes later, well, there's 6 songs, and it blows my mind. I'm incredibly
always been like that. You know, I mean, when I first met Matty, he was playing in a band called Steel Affliction, and they were wild, man. Like, they were he was also doing the Berserker at the time, but you know, it was but I was seeing Steel Affliction because we were playing gigs with them a lot, and I would just go there and just stand at the front of the stage and watch him play, just in awe. I'm just like, how is this guy this good? Like, it's just insane. And I used to just ask him, you know, like, give me some stuff to work on, you know, because I was playing bass back then, and I was just trying to build up my guitar chops and things. I'm like, just give me something to work on. He's like, oh yeah, just do this, you know. And I'm like asking him about his little sweeping sections he used to have in these solos and things. And I'm just like, how do you do that? And he goes, pretend like you're just wrapping your pick around a 50-cent coin. And I'm like, what the hell? He was just the most, it was almost like a dime bag style, you know, like explanations when I was asking him questions about things like that. I don't know.
Well, I've made that comparison before. I've been like, to me, he's the dime bag of extreme music. Like, Dimebag had this thing where it felt like when he picks up a guitar, music just flows from his fingers. He's got an incredibly natural way of playing guitar, and to me, Matt is exactly the same. It sounds like those riffs are just in him. They're just waiting to come out. It's not a case of he has to consciously sit there and think them through.
Yeah, and the newer Bramlin record is testament to that too, I think, because I think he did a really, really good job on that, considering that Tim wasn't involved in the process. So, like Tim's always been the sound of a Bramlin, and I think Matty did a really good job on, like having to do it without him. So, yeah, I mean, my hat's off to him absolutely for that, because it's a really, really good record, that new one.
Just as we're on the topic of legends, as we wrap things up, you guys just got done playing with some honest to goodness legends. You played a show with Sinister at the back end of January.
Yep.
How was that? Because I will be honest. So I am, and many sections of this podcast over the years has been devoted to how big of a fan I am of Cross the Sticks, Diabolical Summoning, and Hate.
Yep.
I remember seeing them play, and I can't remember who they opened for. I think it might have been Cannibal Corpse in like 2003, and this was when they still had, I think her name was Rachel in the band.
Oh, the vocalist, yeah.
Yeah, and I just remember being so disappointed because it was like they played none of the cool songs. They were fucking terrible on stage. I saw them probably a decade or so later, and again, everybody in the band just looked bored. Like, has there been a bit of a resurgence in the band? Because I cannot imagine. I would hate to be the band I saw in 2003 going on after you guys, because that's going to be a fucking rough night at the office.
So it's a funny story, actually, because we actually played with them in 2014 as well.
Yeah.
They came and they actually did a show in Geelong, and we were like, cool, let's go. So, and then we got on the bill. So I actually had to do double duty that night because I had to play with the Mesium as well. Like watching him back then, they had a completely different lineup aside from Adri. He was the only one who was in the band back then who's still in the band now and has been in the band forever. When we did this run of shows with them, we did one, but when they did this run of shows, completely different lineup. But I think their show has improved leaps and bounds to what it was 10 years ago. Like they were excellent the night that we played with them. We actually had to play after them because they had to play it's like they had to catch a flight back to Manila or something or other at like 11:30. So they went on early in the night. They went on second, and then we played after them, and then Contaminated played last. And that was a tough task playing after them. But
really?
They've definitely stepped their game back up, and like they're a very, very good live band again. I was actually lucky enough too. I saw them at Brutal Assault last year in Czech Republic too, and they were killer. Like they're tight. They're they're nailing everything. They're playing a really mixy sort of set as well. So like they're playing Sadistic Intent, but not really much of the other old stuff. I think they played Leviathan as well at a couple of gigs, but it's mostly off sort of the newer sort of what I call the modern Sinister. They played in 2014. I think they played Diabolical Summoning actually, but it's like I'm the same as you. Like they're my favorite albums. It was Cross the Sticks, Diabolical Summoning.
Those first three albums, I would say, without any shadow of a doubt, they are three of the best death metal albums ever recorded, especially the first two. It's just I've always scratched my head over why things just never picked up for them the way that I felt like it should. I think that had they brought out Cross the Sticks in 1990 or 1991. I think it would have been a completely different story for them. And I mean, they potentially could have, because their demo came out in 1990. But I feel like they were just slightly after the wave, and that to me is a shame, because I mean, anyone who's into death metal needs to check out those albums if they haven't done already, because
100%.
They are genius.
Yeah, and they were so original for the style as well. Like they had their own sound and their own sort of thing going on. The only thing I think that I would even compare as even being close to the sound that they had back then was maybe Vader. and only in certain small aspects, like I always sort of wondered why they didn't get bigger either. And I thought that maybe it was because most of the death metal bands that were getting big were from Florida, so they had ease of access for touring, big market, America and all that sort of thing. Coming from, Netherlands, a bit harder, I guess. I mean, touring's not hard in Europe, but it was a different market. It was a different, level of, I guess, popularity. Like when things get big in America, they just seem to get really big really quick. When things get big in Europe, it's kind of like, I'll just keep that to myself for a little while, until we kind of don't have a choice but to talk about it.
Well, so Across the Sticks, I'm actually wrong. It came out in 1992. Yeah. But I would argue by there's maybe two things, and again, this is hypothetical. I might be completely off of this, but a lot of the death metal that was popular in Europe in the early 90s was a little more melodic than Sinister was making. Like Sinister's death metal would have appealed more to a fan of Deicide, Obituary, Morbid Angel, maybe. So there was that, but also black metal in Europe was starting to pick up at that point. And so I think a lot of people, it's not like now where, everyone listens to whatever they feel like listening to. I think by that point, potentially more people were starting to cross over and getting into, what was happening in Sweden and Norway.
I was about to say, yeah. I think it was more focused on Sweden and things at the time as far as death metal, when, you had Hypocrisy and, like Dismember and stuff like that going on. And, like that was kind of very focused into that region and, being obviously separate to that. I mean, I can't really think of any other bands off the top of my head that were from other sort of out there countries at the time that were doing really well.
No, I don't think so either.
It's tricky,
I'm trying to wrap my head around it now, actually. But, what I will say, if ever there's a band that would benefit from doing, when bands go out and they do like a whole classic album end to end, Sinister need to go out and do. If I were them, I would do Across the Sticks, Diabolical Summoning, end to end performance, because both albums are only about a half an hour long. Just to be able to hear Leviathan again, fucking genius.
I know,
absolute genius. And Mike on that Diabolical Summoning album, one of the finest vocal performances ever captured in death metal, in my opinion.
Yep, and Hate too. Like I thought his performance on Hate was absolutely insane. Like he just sounded otherworldly on that.
Well, Hate was also it was an incredible album. I do think that it's an album that kind of loses its edge a little bit on the second half. Like that first Awaiting the Apsu, Embodiment of Chaos, and Art of the Damned. It's such a powerful opening.
Unseen Darkness.
Three punch combo. Unseen Darkness is very, very cool. And then To Mega Theron's not very good. The Cursed Mayhem. The Blood Feast.
I like Cursed Mayhem. I always liked the intro to Cursed Mayhem. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah,
with the drum intro and everything, I thought that was killer.
Yeah, but the grooves and the breakdowns on Awaiting the Apsu, Embodiment of Chaos, and Art of the Damned. Jesus, I mean, fucking
crushing.
Best of the best. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, you guys, in terms of touring plans, anything like, are we going to see you in Europe at any point? Are you going to be at a hypothetical Dead by Dog 2? What's coming up for Destructor at the moment?
Let me just backtrack a little bit too to when you were talking about playing with legends and talking about Sinister. We also played with Nile in October. That was cool.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and then the year before that, I think it was, or maybe even less, we played with Iron Morbid as well. So that was also like another bucket list to play with Sandoval and Dave Vincent. So and they were cool guys. It was fun. The guys from Nile were fun too. But yeah, I feel really lucky to be able to play with those kind of bands. So it's good.
Well, you mentioned playing with Crisian, mate. I mean that.
And Crisian as well. There's been.
I think just to witness them in action would have been just an absolute thrill to me.
Dude, they're a machine band. Like they're just I can't see them ever having a bad night. I remember watching them at Brutal Assault one year. I think it was maybe 2017 or 2019. And I remember watching them early in the festival too. It was like day 1 or 2, and it was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was just standing up on the hill watching them, and I finished watching their set, and I'm just like, well, that's the bar for the entire festival set right there.
Yeah.
Like, good luck catching that one.
I've seen them a few times, and well, the one performance I will never forget. They opened for Behemoth at the Underworld in Camden, and they made Behemoth sound like complete and utter turd by comparison. I mean, they were so tight, so aggressive, and just, again, they're one of those bands where every single thing that they do is delivered with such sincerity. Like there is no question that they mean everything that they're saying, that they're doing. Every note is played with intent. They're a phenomenal band.
Yeah, no, they know their craft. That's for sure. Like the gigs that we've done with them, like they're very particular about certain things that they need in their sound and stuff like that. And you can absolutely see why when you see the show in full effect. Like it makes perfect sense, and you don't want to undersell yourself or the people who have paid the money to come see you. So anyway, back on track. As far as what we're doing, we're in the midst at the moment of just kind of trying to get all around Australia. So we're not really doing it as a tour as such. We're just trying to do like one a month here and there, and like just get around to all the different major cities. We did Adelaide with Niall back in October, so we're going to go back there in May. I think it's the first weekend of May. We just did Hobart, so first time playing down in Tassie. That was like 3 weeks ago or something. We're playing tomorrow night in Melbourne at the Gasso with Voidfall and a couple of other bands. We've got Sydney next month with Pestilential Shadows and a couple of other bands up there. And we've got Canberra coming as well. I think that's a little bit later in the year though. We're in talks to work something out for Brisbane. So we're trying to get around to like do all the Australian stuff. Look, we talk about getting over to Europe all the time. Jared and I are just frothing to get over there and play. It's been really hard sort of, just with like life here and, family and work and, all these sort of things that we've got to kind of worry about on the side. But look, I think that we're probably in the best position that we've maybe ever been in as far as trying to get over there. We really just need to sort of work out, how we do it because, like Europe's one of those places where it's expensive, so we need to have a good offer to get over there. We need to be able to cover the majority of the expenses or all expenses, because, playing music doesn't make a lot of money and, we all have lives outside of music that we need to pay for as well. So jobs don't cover it either. So, yeah, it's a tricky one, but if we get the right offer and we get the, get something that looks good for us, then yeah, for sure we'll get over there. I mean, it's a bucket lister for sure. Like we don't want to be one of those bands that's played in the States, played in Australia, and never made it to Europe. Like we also want to do Japan. Like we want to get up to Japan and play some shows up there. Like that's been on our list for a little while. So hopefully we can pull all this sort of stuff off over the next couple of years. It's just about getting the all the details and getting all the lines to line up.
Oh, my suggestion is for any promoter or somebody with smarts, Crisian, Destructor, Werewolves. The bill is called, or the tour is called, the Depussification of the Nation. And you storm through Europe and storm through the US. People would fucking love that.
Well, when we wrote the Indomitable album, the whole idea on this, and it's funny because you read reviews and you kind of go, yeah, all right, that's fine. Most of the reviews for the album have been really good, I should just say. But there's just some passing comments in the album that, it's not really as diverse as some of the other ones have been before. That was absolutely our intention on this one. This whole purpose of this album was to just write, start to finish, balls to the wall. None of this twisting genres or anything like that. It was like, we just want to write a savage album that we want to actually, if we play the whole thing from start to finish one day in a set, we're going to finish that set and just collapse. That's what we wanted. We wanted it just to be utter savagery. So, and, I think we achieved that pretty well. Like most of the songs are pretty hard to play, man. They're fast. They're very meticulous in the way that you have to play them. Like there's lots of down picking and, things like that you can't just slack on because otherwise it doesn't sound right. So, we just wanted to write the most aggressive thing that we've written. So, yeah, I think we did pretty well.
You did a phenomenal job, brother. And I want to say thank you very much for your time. What a blast. getting to do this. And we will do something like this again in the future, no doubt.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's awesome. Like, I've been, watching the show for a long time. So yeah, it's
thank you. Thanks for checking out the show. And no, as I said, a lot of love for Destructor on Into the Necrosphere, and I'm sure we'll talk again down the road.
Cheers, man. Thanks heaps.
Destructor out of Australia with a track called Path to Lucifer. It's on their new album Indomitable, available right now on Hells Headbangers Records. Massive thank you to Chris for his time. He accommodated me at the tail end of a Friday for him. Early morning for me, just in case I seemed a little blary-eyed, but what a great dude. What a fun catch-up. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. As always, the Destructor Bandcamp will be in the description to the podcast, so show the band some love and support. When you do, you let them know that it was old Jackson at Into The Necrosphere who sent you, and I think it's safe to say that Chris is going to be back on the podcast at some point in hopefully the not-too-distant future. Right now, my friends, if you're the kind of jabroni that gets inspired at the sight of staged photographs of grown men weeping with the hashtag, "It's okay to not be okay," then it's time to hit the bricks. Because this is my weekly news rant.
Round them up for judgment. And hang them where the world can see.
All right, my friends, we kick off on metalstorm.net as always, the finest metal news website in all the land, even though their abuse of the English language is sometimes questionable. First headline grabbing my attention. Asherontis have got a brand new song out. Says here, Greek black metal purveyors Asherontis are premiering a brand new track called Serpent's Oath, Hymns of the Coiled Void. It'll be part of their upcoming studio album Nekaya, The Necromantic Patterns, and that will see an official release on April the 30th via Zazen Sounds in union with Ill Damnation Productions. Nice album cover. This is, I believe, the 10th album that Asherontis are putting out. They've been around since like the mid-2000s, so a not unprolific band. It also feels to me like nary a day goes by when there is not something decent coming out of, or at least something semi-interesting coming out of the Greek black metal scene. So, you know, very buoyant at the moment over there. That being said, let's hear what Serpent's Oath sounds like. All right. I'm very tempted to just let this carry on, but I'm going to pause there. The first thing to say about Asherontis, is that these guys are no slouches. I mean, you can clearly hear that, but they've been around the block. So VP Adept, as he is now known, the vocalist and guitarist, he has been in no less than 7 bands, or at the very least 7 bands, according to Metal Archives. And the rest of the band have been players in a number of other bands as well. Like, nothing major that stands out. It says here VP Adept was at one point in Nightbringer, but only for live purposes. So, yeah, they know what they're doing, and you can definitely hear that too. Production is top-notch. I think the drumming in particular stands out as absolutely superb. So Atum, the drummer, apparently otherwise known to friends and family as Simone Lugas of Italy, he really knows his way around them skins. And generally speaking, I enjoy it. I think that main riff in the verse, it does sound a little bit too derivative of Swedish black metal, particularly kind of mid to late 90s Swedish black metal. Dissection, Dark Funeral, Necrophobic. They really lean into that influence very heavily. But then once they change gears at about the 1 minute 49 mark, and that spoken word part comes in. Firstly, you guys know my view on spoken word in any kind of music. Generally speaking, it falls flat. So they actually make it work. And I think at the point that they start doing that, the song becomes way more atmospheric, way more haunting, darker. Then you've got this really cool guitar lead that comes over it as well. And that sounds... what would be the right word? Mournful? Mournful sounds a bit Nancy to me. I don't mourn when I listen to music, but you know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, to me, the song really hits its straps at that 1 minute 50 mark, and from there it gets more and more interesting. So, I'm not ready to give this a top notch just yet, but definitely something to keep your eyes peeled for when it comes out. I'll certainly be listening with at least a degree of interest when the record is released. All right, moving swiftly along. There's news here that Old Man's Child is working on new material. Tom Runa Anderson, otherwise known by his stage name as Galder, has announced the revival of Old Man's Child after parting ways with Dimmu Borgir last August. The Norwegian symphonic black metal band is set to perform live for the first time in 26 years and is currently working on their first new material since 2009. Skimming over the article, basically they say they're going to stick to working with people that they know. It seems as though they are referencing particularly people who are local. And I will just say once again, for the record, that I did mention, and I can't remember off the top of my head, who was the dude that left Campfire? I think this was kind of the back end of last year. Jon Bakker on bass. I fucking bet that Jon is going to be playing an Old Man's Child. Might be wrong, but I'm reasonably sure that he's going to be doing that. But yeah, looks like Galder is talking also about getting a vocalist to help him out on stage, and then he confirms here that Chodolv, also formerly of Dimmu Borgir, Suspiria, Abyssic, and Tirus, is going to be returning and playing drums in the summer. Then they've announced performances at Sweden Rock Festival, Tons of Rock, and Helsinki Metal Festival. Sadly, not Beyond the Gates this year, where I will most definitely be in attendance. But we hope that he will make an appearance there next year. But I'm excited about new Old Man's Child for sure. I think they've not really spoken about it whatsoever, but I'm going to waver a guess and say there was some bad blood there in the separation. Not knowing anything about what happened, reading into it, I suspect that Galder wanted to be more creatively active, and kind of being in a band that takes as long as Dimmu Borgir is taking to write anything new, I think he just felt like, where is this going? So I don't blame him for making the move. Pretty sure nobody else would either. I've posted some clips and reels and stuff of the Silinos interview that I did last year. The general consensus amongst the entire Legion is that those motherfuckers need to stop being so goddamn lazy, and they need to go back to maybe something that's a little bit more old school. But we'll see what they do when they finally bring out a new album. Again, I respect what they're able to do as a band on the more recent records. It's very, very ambitious, but it doesn't do the same for me as Stormblast or, even in Throne Darkness Triumphant, certainly not Spiritual Black Dimensions. Okay, let's listen to another song. Hexvessel have announced a new full-length release. I've been very excited about hearing this, in part because I love the previous Hexvessel record, Polar Veil, that came out in 2023, in the year of our Lord, 2023. But also, many of the Legion have been raving about this on the socials. I see what you guys are posting. So I'm expecting the best. It says here, Finnish neo-folk melodic black metal act Hexvessel have disclosed details and a first single of what will be their 7th full-length installment entitled Nocturne. It'll be set free on June the 13th, 2025 via Prophecy Productions. Let's hear what it sounds like. Stunning. It always takes you a little while to wrap your head around any Hexvessel song, and again, they are one of those bands that I fully concede is not going to be to everybody's taste. But if you like previous Hexvessel material, you kind of know that the psychedelic stuff, they get referred to here as a black metal act. I wouldn't really say that they're black metal. They have roots in black metal, and that sometimes comes out in their music, but they are a dark progressive rock band for all intents and purposes, and what they do is not only exceptionally interesting, but also brilliantly unique, and I love it. Absolutely love it. Thumbs up for me, maybe even a top notch for me. The song, by the way, I don't think I mentioned the song title, A Dark and Graceful Wilderness. So very, very much looking forward to this album being released June 13th, like I said, via Prophecy Productions, and on this album cycle, I will get somebody from Hexvessel on the podcast. So, great work there. I'll also say, by the way, if you were watching this on YouTube, you'll probably agree, I think this is one instant where the music video actually genuinely enhances the feel of the song. Music videos, for the most part, in my view, total waste of time and money. If I were a band, I would focus just on a couple of lyric videos and be done with it. But on this occasion, I think it works really well. Nice album cover as well. Kind of slightly reminds me of Burzum, but Burzum seen through the prism of Hexvessel, kind of the way that they play black metal, I guess, if you want to call them black metal. Right, let's move on to some Legion questions. We're going to start with one from Metal Shack. What are your thoughts on the new Havu Krunu album? Also, what is your favorite band from Finland? Love the new Havu Krunu album. I think I've said this before. I reacted to one of the songs on the news rant and loved that. The whole rest of the album is excellent. My favorite band from Finland, absolutely no question, is Horner. Especially going on recent form, that band on their last 2 albums has been something else. Absolutely love them and absolutely love what they do. I think they are one of the best bands in black metal, period, not just, bands from Finland. But, I mean, there's so many great bands from Finland. There's, if you want to go for legacy bands, you've got Impaled Nazarene, who I think continue to produce strong music. And then you've got bands like Divenial Verdict, just a bunch of stuff. Satanic War Master's most recent album, excellent. And of course, there's the mighty Rauta and Nightside. I thought that reunion was fantastic. Reunion is like first album they've done in a while. Really, really good stuff. So, if ever there's a scene that's in great health, the Finnish scene is in great health. But Horner lead the way as far as I'm concerned. Next up, we've got Kilu666. He asks, are you able to listen to music at your day job? Intermittently. Depends on how busy I am. I mean, my days, I know it's cliche to say, but no day tends to be the same. So, some days I could have 6-7 hours to myself and I'm busy putting together decks or presentations, or I'm going through different reports or whatever the case might be. And I find when I'm doing work like that, solo work, then having music on helps me concentrate just way better. So I always have music going, but very often I end up just being on meetings all the time. So the way that I get all my music listening in, I've said before, at the gym, first thing in the morning, after work, I like sitting down in front of the hi-fi, pouring a glass of wine and listening properly to an album. And then also when I drive to go fetch my daughter, which is a 2.5 journey there and a 2.5 hour journey back. Okay, Gates to Hell have put out a new music video. I was relatively underwhelmed by the previous one that we listened to on this on this very podcast, on this very segment. But it says here, concurrently with the release of their new record, Death Comes to All, American deathcore ensemble Gates to Hell put out a new music video for the 21 Sacraments single. Let's see if this is any better. I'll definitely give them their due. That bit that we just heard now, it's more of kind of a hardcore breakdown than is deathcore, although I suppose you could, that's quibbling semantics, because deathcore is meant to be a 50-50 blend between hardcore and death metal. But that bit is good. Definitely better than the previous song. I mean, I still feel like when it comes to deathcore, you can take the vast majority of deathcore bands. I don't care whether it's Die Art is Murder or anybody else. Line them all up together, and if you came across somebody who says the only music I listen to is deathcore, and you said, here are the top 6 greatest deathcore bands of all time, you played them a song off each or by each of those bands, I'd be fucking stunned if they get 6 out of 6. It's just a genre that it seems to kind of be stuck in permanent creative arrested development. It never really They've thrown in some black metal stuff recently. There's bands putting in a bit of keyboards, but it's mostly thoroughly unconvincing, and it just all sounds the same. And maybe that's because I'm turning 45 in a couple of days' time, and it's a scene that's just left me by the wayside. But I just don't care for it very much. That being said, that song, not terrible. Certainly not something that I'll completely hate on. But it's not, a band I'm going to be rushing to listen to anytime soon. Unmerciful are releasing a new album in May. Topeka, Kansas-based brutal death metal band Unmerciful has revealed their upcoming new album, Devouring Darkness. That'll drop on May the 23rd through Willowtip Records. Unmerciful have also debuted the first single, apparently, called Infernal Conquering. It is available for streaming below. Let's give it a spin. It's not terrible. It's heavy. It's somewhat aggressive. Like, for me, heaviness and brutal doesn't necessarily equate to aggressive. Deicide is arguably the least aggressive, the least heavy of Deicide's albums. It's certainly the one that's got the most overt hooks. Glenn's vocals are the most legible. In terms of production, it's one of the least heavy Deicide albums, but it is by far one of the most convincingly hateful and aggressive records ever produced. I've said that many, many times before. So overall brutality, heavy production, that sort of thing, that doesn't necessarily make it aggressive to me. It's decent. But my problem with a band like this is there is nothing remarkable about what they're doing. If I want to hear this style of music, and I have limited time, as per the question that was asked earlier, am I going to listen to the latest Brodequin album, or am I going to listen to this? Or am I going to listen to the previous Pyrexia record, or a Suffocation album, or even Immolation, or any of those bands, or am I going to listen to Unmerciful? I think we know the answer to that question. So I think if this is the style of music that you enjoy listening to on a almost constant basis, then, give Unmerciful a crack. I definitely am not. I have a broader palette, and I have higher demands for music than they are offering me there. So, okay, a couple more questions. Berufend has asked, any chance of getting any label runners on the show? For example, Kunal from Transcending Obscurity Records, Phil from Deborah Morty Productions. I'm getting Martin, the owner of Prophecy Productions, on the podcast. He did a really good interview with a fucking completely and utterly useless metal website called Metal One. And this guy that was interviewing was badgering him about, why he's platforming quote-unquote sus, sketch, or right-wing bands. and he basically swatted him down in the most beautifully eloquent way possible. I'm not going to paraphrase from the article because I'm probably going to get it wrong if I do, but we'll talk about that in detail when he comes on the show. And I'd love to find out his take on the current industry and where things are going. And of course, talking about record labels already announced, but next week, just to remind you all, easily the most requested guest on Into the Necrosphere right now, the mighty J-Dog of Hells Headbangers, and we did get into quite a lot of industry conversation and label conversation as well. So, Berufend, you have got a bunch of good stuff coming your way sooner rather than later. Okay, another question. I Smell Music 84 asks, what are the 5 Polish metal bands you currently like the most? Off the top of my head, and I will say this is incredibly difficult to do because there are so many bands in Poland that are awesome. Cult Vendor, Ars Magna Umbra, Koenig Reichsal, Odraza, and Above Aurora. I would add Outer in there as my favorite Polish black metal or Polish metal band, but they are unfortunately broken up for reasons that I do not understand, do not comprehend. I wish they would get back together again, but yeah, I've spoken a couple of weeks ago about that Outer album. You definitely need to check that out. But those 5 bands, definitely my favorite of a bumper crop. I mean, we're talking about Greece being buoyant for black metal and buoyant for extreme music generally. But Jesus Christ, I mean, there's few countries that have the just sheer volume of excellence being churned out quite like Poland. All right, The Haunted are back with a new full-length announcement. I was caught by surprise on this one. I didn't realize that they were back together making music. I thought most of the dudes were still busy with At the Gates. But either way, it says here, on May the 30th, 2025, Swedish experienced metal ensemble The Haunted will return with their first long player after 2017 entitled Songs of Last Resort. It's comprised of 12 new tracks. For a preview, you can give a listen to the first single and opening track entitled Warhead.
Automated launch sequence activated. This is an automated general transmission. Seek shelter immediately. Avoid fallout. Predetermined targets. Assigned.
So I think the first thing that we need to agree on is that that was way better, vastly superior to anything put out in the last at least decade by Creator, by Destruction, by Sodom, by a bunch of more established bands. I'd say, without a doubt, it's also the best thing that The Haunted have put out in the last decade, but they haven't exactly been too busy over the last decade, so that's not hard. You're basically including 2 albums in that, Exit Wounds and Strength in Numbers, both of whom had a bit of a rough ride on Metal Archives. If we go through the whole discography, the first Haunted album I love. I remember hearing that for the first time, being blown away by it. I thought to myself, this is like, these guys are the spiritual successors to like a latter day, at least for that time, latter day Slayer. The Haunted made me do it, or at least made me do it, as I believe the actual title is. That wasn't bad. I didn't quite gel with it. I did like One Kill Wonder a lot more. It was much more aggressive. Again, not a particularly well-reviewed album if you go by Metal Archives, but I enjoyed it. And I really, really enjoyed Revolver, which was the Peter Dolving's Return album. From there on out, it's kind of been a bit patchy. The Dead Eye versus... I preferred Versus to The Dead Eye. I thought The Dead Eye was a bit of an abortion, to be honest. Versus, certainly better, but again, not quite on the same level as Revolver. Then Peter Dolving hits the bricks, or actually, did he hit the bricks? No, he was actually in the band for Unseen, which was another album that I didn't care for very much. He then fucked off. Exit Wounds, Strength in Numbers, both relatively mid albums. But this sounds like it has a lot of promise. I'll certainly say that. Really good production, really good performances, as you'd expect from these guys. And I think that Marco Arro sounds fantastic. I mean, he sounds in probably the best shape vocally of his life. Looks pretty decent as well. All things considered, I remember meeting him years ago in London, and he used to be a portly fellow. So, seems like he's gotten in shape. He's gotten himself a fancy new beard. So, yeah, I think this has got a lot of promise. How the rest of the album will sound, I don't know. I mean, again, I don't think, generally speaking, The Haunted are a band that trade on surprises. I think if you like that style of music, you can pretty much be guaranteed you're going to get something you enjoy when the full thing comes out. But, yeah, decent effort there. Thumbs up for me. All right. Moving swiftly along, And Oceans have got a new single out. It says here, And Oceans strike again with their newest single, Prophetical Mercury Implement, from their upcoming album, The Regeneration Itinerary. The latter hits the streets on May the 23rd, 2025, through Season of Mist. Let's hear what it sounds like. When An Oceans put out, as in God and Sown Tombs, their proper comeback album. I mean, I know they put out Cosmic World Mother in 2020, but I felt like there was something of a comeback in as in God and Sown Tombs. Maybe it was just me, but that felt like a real return to form for them. After they'd been doing a whole bunch of experimentation and they were out in the wilderness, creatively speaking. What was great about that record is that they really played to their strengths. That symphonic black metal that they had done so well on the Dynamic Gallery of Thoughts and the Symmetry of Eye was back in full force. I kind of feel like this, on first impressions, is a bit of a step back. I'm not hearing it, fully implemented or fully deployed, but I am hearing some of the tendencies from Amgard and Cypher and that era of the band in the first 2 minutes of the song. There's definitely a dialing back, like a noticeable dialing back of the symphonic black metal elements, and I'm not sure that I like it. The song isn't bad, so I'm not. It's not a case of me saying that I don't like the song. It's a case that I so enjoyed what they did on As in God and So in Tombs. I'd kind of hoped that they would keep on with that track, and it doesn't feel to me like that's the case here. So it'll be interesting to hear the whole thing. As a matter of fact, I do believe that I have the promo for it in my inbox, but I honestly very rarely listen to promos. So maybe I'll dig that one up and I'll give that a gander. But so far, I'm in two minds. Right, more questions. Margarita Costa 270 asks, what are your top 5 favorite bands? Once again, I go straight off the top of my head with this one. It is going to be Akrakoka, Paradise Lost, The Antichrist Imperium, Ecclese, and who else would I stick in there? Typo Negative. But again, that's hard because now I'm leaving out a bunch of death metal stuff as well. For me, oftentimes it comes down to albums as much as it comes down to bands. Like if you were to ask me this question in 1995, right around the time that Once Upon a Cross came out, then Deicide is almost certainly in that list. But the bands that are my go-to bands that I'll always go back to, and when I'm stuck for anything to listen to, those would be the bands that I would listen to. So let's stick with that for now. Maybe I'll be cheeky like I was last week, and I'll squeeze in a number 6, Funeral Mist. Right, this will be a harder one, he says, by way of follow-up question. Rank your top 5 from year. He gives me the options: Warrell Dane, Peter Steele, James Hetfield, Al Jorgensen, and Glenn Benton. Now, Al Jorgensen is an easy 5. Obviously, I used to love Ministry. When Al became part of the Tesla Vandalist set, I decided he's not for me anymore. James Hetfield, one of the greatest frontmen of all time when he was on the booze, but he's a shell of his former self. So he goes to number 4. Glenn Benton at number 3. Again, one of the greatest death metal vocalists of all time, but he has been for the last decade plus not in the best shape of his life. He is not the man that did the first 3 records. Then you've got Warrell Dane. I'll put him at number 2. Incredible singer, amazing frontman. And then Peter Steele, Pete Rod of Steel. How could I not have him at number 1? Very, very few people can be better than Pete Rod of Steel. Another question, and I love this one. Planet Metal BJJ asks, question for the pod regarding the best scrappers in metal. If Biff broke out at a gig between bands, who would hold their own? I got to go with Billy Graziade, Matt Heafy, and then he says because the dude can grapple, Harley Flanagan, and Phil Anselmo. If we're going with higher profile dudes, then I would say probably Phil Anselmo. I think James from Harm's Way, he looks, pretty badass. But, I tell you what dude would probably beat the fuck out of all these guys, Drugoth. So, trains like an animal. I have it on first-hand account from Nathan of Gravier that Drugoth is not a man that you want to mess with in the gym. Guys in there all the time, training like an absolute savage. If you're used to being in, a combat environment, naturally you're gonna excel if a biff broke out between bands. Who else would I put in there? I don't know whether the dude trains or not, but Scott Taysom of Cloak, he's got all the makings of a mixed martial artist. He's got them long limbs. He looks athletic. Also has got a bit of muscle on him. I know he did a bit of work with Cheyenne on the training side of things. Probably for aesthetics as much as anything else. But if the dude trained, I have a hunch, he could find himself taking to that sport more naturally than he anticipated. Mike Hill of Tombs, he trains a lot. Muay Thai dude, trains with very, very high level people at the gym that he goes to as well. If I were choosing my gang, it'd be Drew Goth, Mike Hill, Scott Taysom, Phil Anselmo. That'd be my gang. I'd probably get Cheyenne as well, just for fucking spirit and moxie, and the fact that he probably pound for pound is stronger than all of the dudes that I just mentioned now. Right, let's get on to some more music. We got Serpent Corpse. It says here Canadian 4-piece Serpent Corpse reveal first details and a first single in regards of their sophomore album announcement. It's going to be entitled Retaliate and released via, surprise, surprise, Transcending Obscurity Records. Cover artwork can be seen below. Transcending Obscurity Records sure do sign up a lot of bands. I would love to take a gander at the deal that these bands are getting, because either Kunnell is very rich or he's a fucking exceptional businessman. So, anyways, let's hear the song. It's called Iron Corpse, as I said. The band, of course, Serpent Corpse. Pretty boring stuff. Nothing much really going on. Nothing blowing me away. It's not bad. I'm just pretty indifferent to it. You could play it in the background and you may as well be playing fucking rain sounds. You could be playing whale song and I wouldn't really notice a difference. That also, again, that does seem to be, and I definitely don't want to sound like I'm hating here, but that does seem to be a bit of a thing with Transcending Obscurity Records. He signs a lot of great bands, but he also signs a lot of bands that they're not dreadful. They're just unremarkable. So this is why I said I'm very, very curious as to what the what sort of deals these bands are getting. I'm not suggesting that anybody's being ripped off or anything like that. He just signs at such a volume and seems to put out things at such a pace, which again may be my imagination. I'm just curious to know how everything is financed, and again, maybe the guy's got some tips for the rest of the industry. Okay, we were talking about Polish bands earlier, and I was super impressed with this band when we played their first single on the News Rant. Dormant Ordeal have got a brand new single out. It's called Solvent. Poland's Dormant Ordeal, it says here, are streaming their new single, Solvent, coming as a second taste of their next full-length installment, Tooth and Nail. The latter is set for release on April the 8th through Willowtip Records. Let's give it a whirl. Absolutely sensational. Fantastic production, great songwriting, awesome riffing, and then you've got this fucking gargantuan of a vocalist. Magic Profits. I'm sure I fucked his surname up. But I know I know how to pronounce the name because I had somebody named Magic working for me. But yes, I mean, he has a kind of throwback actually to that vocalist for Outer. I can't remember who that was. But just sounds so fucking brutal and savage. And then, you know, I think I compared them to Ulcerate when I listened to that first single. And those comparisons, I think, still stand, but they definitely bring in their own unique flavor to that kind of dark, progressive style of death metal. And they focus rather than, you know, trying to be, and I'm not saying Ulcerator being, you know, dissonant and discordant, but a lot of bands that do that, they seem to focus a lot on technique as much as actual songwriting. With these guys, it's song first. You know, everything that they do is very clearly in service of a bigger piece of music. I mean, this is eight minutes long, so again, we're not going to do it justice fully by just listening to 2 minutes and 53 seconds. But everything that I've heard there definitely merits a top notch. Really, really looking forward to what this sounds like. This has been a very impressive find for me in 2025 so far. I mentioned last week that Hierophant have joined forces with Agonia Records. Of course, friends of mine, friends of the show. So congratulations to them. Let's move on to a question again. And one year that I really liked as well that I definitely wanted to make sure that I answer on this week's episode. Poltergeist82 asks, which band from the UK would you like to see reformed? There are two bands, and I have actually pulled together some music to illustrate my point. The first one is Ted Maul. Ted Maul is a band that if you were going to shows in London around the kind of mid-2000s, you would have seen these guys open for tons of bands. They actually opened, I think, for Acrococker a number of times. And in terms of on-stage raucousness, they were second only to Stamping Ground. I mean, they really, really got fucking wild on stage. Their audiences got wild. They threw so much into their music. And I think if you take the time or the era in which they existed, I reckon if they got back together today, you could put them in front of the audience of any of the biggest deathcore bands on the face of the earth, and they'd eat their fucking lunch. Because it's got the heaviness of deathcore, but it's got real aggression, real testosterone, real manly shit going on. Yeah, they mix in a bunch of stuff as well, drum and bass, and a whole load of other influences. But I always thought this band never got their due. Let me play you a track off their White Label album. I think the only album they ever released, and this was a firm favorite when they played this live. Again, which is why I remember it so well. The song is called "Gutting the Reason." I'll give you about 90 seconds worth, and you make up your mind as to whether I'm right or wrong. if you were there, no doubt you can see in your mind's eye the fucking insanity that would have been reigning on whatever floor of whatever club you were in when you heard these guys play. If you weren't, hopefully you kind of get a sense of what I was saying. Like this band really wrote their music to be played live, and fuck me, did it when they never turned in a bad show. That I can remember. Man, when they landed, they were fucking brilliant, second to none. So definitely a band that I think need to get back together. And then another band that I think actually could do genuinely very, very well if they got back together, Desecration. I know Ollie Jones from Desecration was on J-Dog's channel recently. Great death metal band, like brutal death metal, but brutal death metal that also had memorable songs. And was very song orientated. So rather than, like Unmerciful just sounds, again, unremarkable, as I said. Desecration had songs you could actually remember, released a couple of fucking fantastic albums. Let me give you another 60 seconds of that, and you can hear for yourself in case this is a band that flew under your radar. That, of course, is taken from their 2003 album Gore and Perversion 2. A couple that I would definitely recommend you check out. Murder in Mind, that came out in 1998. Inhuman, that came out in 2000. Excellent, both of them. And Gore and Perversion, their first album, is fucking brilliant as well. It's actually Lee Wallenschlager formerly of Malevolent Creation, that got me onto this band. I remember when he came to London the first time, he came back with a bunch of cool stuff. I heard a cassette rehearsal of Acrococker, which at the time I wasn't as impressed with as I would be now. But yeah, I heard that. He was in Throne of Nails briefly, so I heard that, and you just heard a bunch of very, very cool stuff from the scene at the time. But Desecration was always one of the bands that really stuck with me and that I thought was the most impressive from that era. They started in 1993, but kind of mid to late 90s was when they were really flying the flag for British heaviness, British extreme shit. So those are the two bands that I would want to have reform. And then I'll also say this. I know that they haven't technically split up, but I would love to see Acrococker reform, playing music of the ilk of Goat of Mendes, Corazon, and Words Are Going Spoken in their suits on stage. I want the original Acrococker, like the Acrococker that I love back. I didn't like Renaissance and Extremis, which was weird because I'd heard the instrumental tracks when they were recording that, and it sounded like a very different record. I know that apparently they're sitting on something. I don't know why it hasn't been released yet. I'm not in contact with anybody on a regular basis, and I guess I could reach out to David and ask him what the deal is, but I'm possibly not even sure he's going to know. But I want I don't actually care if it's not the Blast for Satan style Acrococker. I would almost go as far as to say I don't want to listen to it. But I want them to be back together again. I'll tell you another band I want back together again, Anel Nathrak. Once again, I know they're not technically split up. I know they're playing shows, but I know Mick is off doing his techno stuff and, getting rich, making money for that Porsche. Don't hold it against him. But, I want a Anel Nathrak that put out albums like the Codex Necro, the best of the best, the choice cuts, unlike that Endarkenment muck with which they sullied a otherwise absolutely stellar reputation. All right, let's take a quick gander over at Blabbershite, and then we'll wrap this up. Ghosts, Tobias Forge. If you want to be super pragmatic, I'm technically a solo artist. The worst thing about a Ghost album is that we have to listen to Tobias Forge's, we have to be inundated with endless articles of Tobias Forge talking absolute fucking nonsense. Of greater interest to me, Dark Angel performs 2 new songs, Extinction Level Event and Circular Firing Squad, at Chile's Metal Beer Festival. Looks to me like there might be video available as well. Now, sadly, it's only going to be... well, actually, I might be wrong. I thought it might only be cell phone footage, but at the very least, the thumbnail here looks bro. So let's give Extinction Level Event a quick listen.
To our new album, this is Extinction Level Event!
Alright, that is fucking terribly recorded. Let's try the other one that they've got here. Maybe that sounds a little bit better.
Circular Firing Squad!
That sounds pretty fucking cool. I mean, as good of an impression of it as we can get from that clip, I like it. They are never ever going to do a Darkness Descends or a Leave Scars ever again. But certainly the song is very, very cool. The performance on stage, it could do with a bit more energy. I get that these folks are, they're getting on in years. Ron Reinhardt, the vocalist, is 60. He, ironically, is the guy that's moving around most. The rest of the band are standing there like fucking statues. So, yeah, like the sound of the music though. But I think with a lot of these older bands, they seem to work an awful lot better inside really small, tightly packed venues. I feel like the energy of the audience kind of makes up for the fact that probably in most cases these guys can't move anymore. The old osteoporosis and the arthritis and whatever else ails them has just meant that their ability to headbang and stuff is not what it once was. But if you go back and you check out any of those old Dark Angel shows, holy fuck were those guys on fire when they were young bloods. The Covenant working on their first new album in more than 20 years. It'll probably take another 20 years for that to be released, but anyway. There's some news here about Sex Pistols playing a secret show, and then Megadeth's Dave Mustaine blasts new metal bands. I actually forgot when Planet Metal BJJ asked me who the toughest man in all of metal is. It's Dave Mustaine, of course. If you read his autobiography, the list of people who narrowly escaped with their lives because he, down to his own benevolent and merciful behavior and attitude, and also the fact that his sensei taught him never to use his Jitkindo to kill people. That list is endless. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap things up for this week. I hope you enjoyed the episode. A big thank you to Chris McEwin from the mighty Destructor. Make sure you check out their new album. It's out on Hells Headbangers. It's called Indomitable. Next week, I am back with J-Dog of the Dead by Dog channel and of Hells Headbangers Records. That is one that is A, not for wimps, and B, not to be missed. I'm wrapping up with another classic this week off the album Dreaming with the Dead. This is Anti-God by Ripping Corpse. Wherever it is that you are, my friends, and whatever it is that you are doing, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you bad motherfuckers again next week.